All right, hi guys. Welcome to the Houston Zoo's Facebook Lives. My name is Kendall and I am a hoofstock keeper here, and we're here with you guys a little bit early today, earlier than normal, because we are here to talk about Silas, our pygmy hippo. And pygmy hippos, like Silas, are actually nocturnal, which means that early in the morning is kind of like late evening for them. So he's getting his breakfast right now, and then he's probably gonna go to sleep for a few hours after this. So we wanted you guys to be able to see him while he was up and active and moving around. One of the reasons we're talking about Silas today is because yesterday was actually National Hippo Day. So we want to celebrate the pygmy hippo that we have here at the Houston Zoo. Silas is almost 4 years old, so he is fully grown. He weighs right around 500 pounds. A lot of times people look at him and they go, oh, a baby, but he's actually not a baby. He is a fully grown adult male pygmy hippo. Pygmy hippos are found in Africa. Mostly along the west coast in kind of the rainforests and the waterways of West Africa. And there's a few differences between pygmy hippos like Silas and a lot of the other, and really the only other species of hippo that live in Africa, the Nile hippo. So Silas and other pygmy hippos are solitary. So they do not like to live in groups. They don't really like to be around other hippos. They like to have their own space and do their own thing and not really have a whole lot of social interactions with other hippos. They spend a lot of the daytime in the water, and then at night they'll come out of the water and forage for food. They eat lots of plants, shoots and tubers and grasses and things like that. So he is an herbivore. He really only eats plants. So right now what he's getting a little bit of alfalfa hay for breakfast. He also gets cherry tomatoes. He'll get heads of romaine lettuce. He can get sweet potato and carrots and lots of veggies and leafy greens for him to eat. You might see a little bit of white liquid coming out from behind his ears. That is actually how pygmy hippos sweat. They do have sweat glands, which is kind of unique. Not all animals do. And with hippos, you can actually see it visibly. So whenever you see him walking around, if he looks like he's got a little bit of white stuff coming out of his ears, that's just him cooling off. His best way to cool off, though, is to actually go into the pool. We do have a large pool for him in his habitat here at the zoo. And whenever it's warm, and on warm days, he will actually go into that water and he can sleep underwater. He can hold his breath for several minutes at a time. So whenever it's hot, especially during the summer, you'll usually find him spending his afternoons kind of dozing in that pool. He'll go to sleep and then he'll come up for air, and then he'll go back to sleep and then he'll come up for air, and he'll just kind of do that all day. Like I said, these guys are nocturnal, so they spend most of the day asleep. He'll also get a variety of snacks like browse throughout the week. We have a horticulture department here at the Houston Zoo whose job is to take care of all the plants and bushes that you see on zoo grounds, and if they ever have to do any tree trimming or anything like that, they will drop those branches off for us at our barns so that we can feed them out to the animals, so that way Silas can get to chew on the leaves and the branches right off the tree the way that he would in the wild. He's got very large canines. I'm not sure if y'all can see that, but when he opens his mouth real wide like he does sometimes when he yawns, or even if he just opens his mouth because he's trying to take a particularly big bite, he does have very long incisor teeth that he can use to defend himself if he ever feels threatened. That being said, these type of hippos are not particularly aggressive. Pygmy hippos are not the kind that you hear about being very aggressive. Pygmy hippos are actually more likely to ignore each other than anything. They don't really fight each other. They just kind of notice that there's another pygmy hippo in the area, ignore it, and move on. They're not really an aggressive species. If anybody has any questions about Silas, feel free to drop them as comments. We'll be answering as many as we can while we do it. All right, we got one question. How often will he be in the water or in the pool? So it kind of varies based on the weather. When it's warm, he really spends most of his days in there, and even some of the nights. So I mean, he can spend 50 to 60% of his time in the water during the summer. When it is the winter and it's a little bit cooler, he's fairly hardy. He's a big guy. Like I said, he weighs 500 pounds, so he doesn't necessarily need to be warm all the time, but he does have a space heater that he'll sleep underneath in his yard throughout the winter when it's cold outside. But even that, sometimes we see him get in the water even when it's cold, so he seems to just like to be in the water at different times throughout the day. So basically, how often is he in the water? As often as he wants to be in the water. It's always there for him. He also really enjoys mud puddles. So on days when it's been really rainy lately, or if we ever get like a big rainstorm go in, just kind of the natural shallow areas and low points in the yard will fill with water and become puddles. And he really loves to sleep in those. So he really likes mud, and mud is good for his little toes. All right, Rachel asked, how does he deal with winter weather? So that's a really great question. Here at the zoo, we make sure that our animals have heaters in their yards so that if it is cold, they can stand underneath or beside those heaters. Either that or they'll have access to an indoor area that is heated when it's cold. And Silas is no exception. So he actually has 2 shelters in his yard that have giant, very powerful heaters underneath them that we turn on when the weather is cold. They're actually automatically triggered when the temperature drops below a certain threshold. And then he knows where those heaters are. So if he ever feels cold, if he's ever feeling like there's some winter weather coming in, he will just go sleep underneath those heaters and they'll keep him warm. We'll also give him lots of coastal hay for bedding, so he can just snuggle down in his little bed underneath the space heater and be perfectly comfortable when it's cold outside. Laura asked, does he have a girlfriend or does he live alone? So that's a great question. He does currently live alone. Like I said, these guys are solitary, so that's a pretty normal social setting for them. However, it's not impossible that we would one day get a girlfriend for him. That is going to be up to the SSP. So the SSP stands for Species Survival Plan, and that is a program whose job is to basically be an online dating service for animals in zoos. So they know all the genetics and all the relatedness of all the different pygmy hippos in zoos in like North America and sometimes a few other places too. And they'll make breeding recommendations based on trying to keep genetic diversity really high. So they'll look at those genetic matches and then make recommendations. So it's definitely possible that at some point in the future we get a girlfriend for Silas. We just don't have one right at the moment. Deborah asks, how much smaller are they than regular hippos? A lot smaller. I don't know the exact height and length of the Nile hippos, but Nile hippos can weigh around 4,000 pounds. Pygmy hippos typically only weigh about 500. So there is a definite size difference there between the Nile hippos and pygmy hippos. Jackie asks, what kind of food is being tossed to him? So he is getting tossed some romaine lettuce and looks like a little bit of papaya and some cherry tomatoes. So he gets a little bit different produce every day. We have an animal nutrition department here at the zoo that makes sure that he always has good, clean, healthy food each morning for him. They'll deliver it to our barns and drop it off. So on top of the hay and the things that he gets like that and the browse that we were talking about earlier, he will also get produce that we can give him in enrichment or for training or even just give it to him as part of his normal diet. So he can get kale, he can get romaine lettuce, he can get papaya and different kinds of melons and carrots and sweet potatoes and just all kinds of different fruits and veggies. And we rotate it throughout the days so that he doesn't necessarily get the exact same things every day. Each day is a little bit of a new day and each day is a little bit different. So keeps things interesting for him. He tends to like the lettuce quite a bit, but things like tomatoes and melons are probably bigger favorites of his. He likes things that are a little bit sweet. All right, we got another question. Crystal asks, do they behave different than regular hippos? Well, they do behave a little bit differently than Nile hippos. Like I said, they are solitary, so a lot of Nile hippo behavior is based on the fact that they are social and they live in herds and they interact with each other a lot and they're very protective of their territory. Pygmy hippos, like Silas here, are solitary, so they don't really have a whole lot of that. They tend to sleep most of the day and then they'll come out on the banks at night and eat. And kind of keep to themselves. So I think that they are just a little bit harder to see in the wild, a little bit harder to study because they're a little bit harder to find. They tend to live in much more secluded areas than Nile hippos. Luz asks, where can we visit Silas at the zoo? Silas is in our hippo yard, which is right next to the zebras, which is right near the entrance to the African forest. So if you guys are ever kind of walking down the zoo, and he's right across from the Ankole cattle. So if you're headed towards the entrance to the African forest, Silas is going to be next to the zebras on the left. He can sometimes be hard to spot in his yard. You have to have a really keen eye because, like I said, sometimes he's in the pool, sometimes he's laying in a mud puddle, sometimes he blends in with his environment really well. If he's just sleeping in the middle of the yard in kind of a mud puddle and he's kind of hunkered down for the day, a lot of times he can look like a rock if you don't have a very sharp eye out looking for him. You kind of got to look everywhere in that yard to see where he's at. So as I was saying before, these guys are mostly from West Africa. They live in a lot of the same places that things like gorillas and Red River hogs live. And so we are helping, here at the Houston Zoo, we do help save pygmy hippos in the wild. We're working on supporting lots of cell phone recycling initiatives. So pygmy hippo habitat is being mined for precious metals that are used in the production of electronics. So one of the best ways that you can help save pygmy hippos in the wild is by actually recycling your electronics so that those parts can be reused as opposed to just buying a new thing and throwing away the old one, so that we don't have to mine habitat for it and then their habitat stays nice and clean and fresh for them. So we help support, we do various cell phone recycling initiatives and things like that, and we help support conservation programs actually there in Africa that do the same thing to try to protect their habitat and make sure that it's still pristine and good for them. So by helping support us and supporting the Houston Zoo, you're actually helping save animals like Silas and his wild cousins. Shannon asks, is early morning and late afternoon the best time to visit him? Yes, that is definitely the best time to see him. So as you guys can tell, we're doing this right around 9 o'clock. That's right when the zoo opens in the morning and he is up and moving around. Within the next, 30 minutes or so, he's probably going to settle down and go to sleep because he is nocturnal. This is kind of the end of his active period. He's going to settle down and go to sleep for most of the day, but usually around 4 o'clock he starts to get up again. He starts to explore, starts looking for more food, the same way that we would, sleep for 8 hours overnight and then wake up and start looking for breakfast. His is just swapped a little bit. So what he's eating right now is kind of like dinner for him, and then he's going to go to bed. So yeah, kind of first thing in the morning and then last thing in the evening are the best times to see him if you want to see him up and moving around. If not, he's probably just going to be sleeping, like I said, either in the pool or in a mud puddle. Those are kind of his favorite things to do during the day. Well, all right, you guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for tuning in to help us celebrate National Hippo Day with Silas here. Thanks again for coming by. Join us next Wednesday at 11 a.m. for another Facebook Live. But also, if you want to visit us in person, just be aware spring break is coming up. It's a great time to come visit the zoo, but it can get a little bit crowded, so you want to reserve those online in advance. It also helps you get the very best price for that week. So that is available on the website now. So thank you again for joining us.